Okay, everybody, welcome to our July Lunch and Learn. We've got just a couple of minutes until noon as folks start to join us. Just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded and that everybody that's joining us will be on mute. So if you have questions for our presenter, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We will answer all questions at the end. I'm going to get us started in just about 1 minute. Okay, well, my clock has us at noon, so we're going to get started. Again, welcome to our July Lunch and Learn. We're joined today by Tamaé Memole from the Resilience Leadership and Learning Institute, from Prevent Child Abuse New York. My name is Rae Glaser. I am the director of the New York State Kinship Navigator program. I'm just going to give us a quick kickoff, and then I will turn it over to our presenter. Again, just a reminder, if you are just joining us, this is being recorded. Everybody that has signed up for today's webinar will receive the slides, and our link to the recording of the presentation will also be available on the Kinship Navigator website and our YouTube page. Everybody will be on mute for the webinar, so if you have questions, again, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will answer them at the end. My name is Rae Glaser. I'm the director of the New York State Kinship Navigator program. I think everybody on the call knows me, but I am leading our Lunch and Learn series. We've been doing these for about 2 years. They are 30-minute presentations across different fields to learn about kinship issues. We've done many webinars in the last couple of years. Just a couple of examples here: kinship care resources in local libraries, mental health, parent-to-parent, tax tips for kinship caregivers, front door services. We've done family court. We've worked with school administrators, Center for Elder Law and Justice. These webinars have all been recorded. They're all right on the Kinship Navigator online resource page, as well as our YouTube channel. Our next Lunch and Learn is August 17th, and we're going to be talking about Berkshire Farms and what they can do for kinship caregivers. Registration for that webinar will be available tomorrow on the Kinship Navigator website. So just a little bit of quick information about the Kinship Navigator. If you're not familiar with us, we are information, referral, and education for kinship caregivers all across New York State, as well as prospective kinship caregivers and those that work with caregivers. We provide connections for available financial assistance, legal advocacy. We make referrals to all the local kinship programs and local services across the state. And we work very closely with departments of social services, the entire kinship system of care, and other local agencies. It's our helplines right there, our website. We are available Monday through Friday, 10 to 4 on our helpline, as well as online chat on our website. Here's just a brief overview. Like I said, we're information, referral, and education. We provide legal fact sheets for kinship caregivers on a full array of kinship services, needs such as financial assistance, school enrollment, tax credits, legal options for caregivers, obtaining official documents, you name it, we're there. We make referrals to all kinship programs as well as other local resources. We provide education to professionals, presentations such as this one, or Kinship 101, KinGap, kinship legal information. We have an online video archive, and we do our Lunch and Learns. We also are the chair of the KinCare Coalition in terms of advocacy across the state. We meet the third Tuesday of every month to discuss kinship issues, legislative policy, budgets, and different initiatives. If you are interested in joining the coalition, our website is right there. You also can go on the Navigator homepage and register for our next upcoming meeting. Here's just a quick snapshot of our website. As you can see here, we've got our legal information. We've got a map. You can click on your county, find any resource you'd like. And Monday through Friday, 10 to 4, you can chat live with a kinship specialist if you'd prefer to do that rather than call our helpline. And we have information right on our homepage about our latest resources that we have for professionals. Virtual case management is the last thing that I'll mention. We have a service that we run in 10 different counties where we work with kinship caregivers to provide in-depth services for families in those counties. As I'm noticing this, I'm actually a little bit out of date for this PowerPoint. I did not update it before this presentation. On our website, we have an updated list of counties. We used to provide them in 16 and now we're providing them in 10. So if you have a question, if you have a client, or if you think that you're eligible for those services, please just let us know and we will get them connected with virtual case management. What we do there is we have a case manager that follows the kinship family for up to 6 months at a time, offers them more facilitated benefits applications, facilitated referrals, more in-depth resources in those specific counties, and really helps that family out more with just a one-on-one phone call for a one-time service. So, you know, if you live in one of the virtual case management counties, you don't have to do anything special, just give us a call. But again, apologies, there are a couple of counties that we've pivoted. So I will make sure I send out that information with the slides and with the recording that y'all receive. Last thing I'll mention is our permission to contact form. This is for any county, any caregiver, anybody working with a caregiver. If you'd like to get them in touch with us, but you're not sure if the caregiver will call us directly, have them fill out the permission to contact form. It's right available on our homepage, and we will reach out to that family rather than putting the onus on them to be in contact with us. When we get this form through our email, we will contact that family within 48 hours. If it's urgent, just write urgent on the top and we will contact them in the same day. If we're not successful, we'll try again the next week. So this is a great way that families that are under a lot of stress that may or may not pick up the phone to call, that the navigator will reach right out to them with services. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Tamaé Memole, my co-presenter today, to talk a little bit more about resources for kinship families that are handling children that have a lot of stress going on in their lives, which I'm sure is many of you. So we're going to pause for just a second so that Tamaé can share her screen, and then we will go forward. Tamaé, over to you.
Thanks so much, Rae. I appreciate it. And thanks so much to everybody who is taking some time out of their day to join us. I'm really, really grateful. So my role, as Rae said, I head up a training institute that is part of Prevent Child Abuse New York. And the work that we do at Prevent Child Abuse New York, I think a lot of folks, when they hear our name, they focus on the child abuse part of our name and not the prevent part of our name. And really, all of the work that we do at Prevent Child Abuse New York is laser focused on primary prevention of child abuse and neglect. And so what that means is our work is focused on strengthening families and strengthening healthy relationships. So this actually, managing stress while parenting a child who's experienced trauma falls right under our purview of a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the trainings that we develop and deliver. So what I'm going to do, my plan for today, since we have just about 20 minutes, I'd like to do this in 20 minutes. So we have some time to take some questions, is I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of why we're talking about this and what are some of the things that are important to remember about trauma itself and children who have experienced trauma. And so the first thing that we know is that there was an ACE study, an adverse childhood experience study that was conducted. The study was released in 1998. And it was a partnership between Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, California, and the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. And they were looking at whether or not there was any kind of connection between early childhood adverse experiences, like bad things that happened to us in childhood. And they wanted to see if there was any kind of relationship as we age, right, and become adults, like what effect those experiences might have on our physical well-being. And so they surveyed over 17,000 primarily Caucasian and pretty well-resourced adults. And I say they were well-resourced because this was before the ACA, and you had to have really good health insurance in order to participate. So these were middle class to upper middle class, primarily Caucasian folks that they surveyed. And what they found was Really amazing and completely overwhelming and powerful stuff. So in looking at these 17,000 adults, what they found was there was a powerful relationship between those adverse childhood experiences we have and our physical, mental, and emotional well-being as we age. What they found is that our bodies actually convert that trauma, those negative experiences, into organic disease later in life. So things like what they found was there was also a graded dose response. So what that means is the greater the number of the adverse experiences you had as a child and the more intense they were, the more negative effects there were on your physical, mental, and emotional health later in life. And they found that there was, as I said, there was a greater dose response, but they were able to actually take a look at the ACEs that were reported by participants, and they summed them up into different categories, and they created a 10-question questionnaire that's used to assess your cumulative childhood stress. Now, this original study, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions, right? And so what they've done is they have distilled all of those questions into 10 primary questions that really help you generalize what those experiences were and what the cumulative childhood stress was. As I said, there was a graded dose response relationship between the number of ACEs, the intensity of the ACEs, and your outcomes over life. And so that opened a lot of doors. And I say that because surveying such a huge sample of adults, what they found was that more than 2/3 of those folks had experienced an adverse childhood experience. And so what we found was that adverse childhood experiences are pretty common. Knowing that Caucasian, primarily Caucasian, well-resourced group of folks were carrying around ACE scores in their invisible backpacks allows us to generalize those outcomes to the broader population, right? So we can make general assumptions about people that we run into on the street, kids that we are working with, adults that we're engaging with, right? There, we can make the assumption that more than 2/3 of the people that we interact with probably have experienced an adverse childhood experience. The reason that that is so significant is that trauma actually has an impact on brain development. That's why they looked at early childhood adverse childhood experiences, right? Because trauma actually changes brain architecture. It can actually change the structure of your brain. And that's because when you are experiencing that prolonged toxic stress without any buffering that happens, there's a constant release of stress hormones that then results in some changes, right? And what we know is that it actually affects our ability as humans. It interferes with certain areas of our brain development. Things like healthy attachment, right? Our ability to form healthy relationships. Impulse control is a really big thing for adults to remember when they're working with children of trauma, because impulse control is so difficult to manage, right? Physical health, our ability to regulate our own emotions is affected by trauma, right? So that self-regulation of emotions so that we can experience really strong emotions without lashing out, without them busting out of us and exploding, right? So those are all things that trauma affects in each of us. So really important information to remember. So that now that we know this, what do we do with this information? What do we have to remember? And I think the biggest thing that we can remember is that just because you've experienced negative things in your childhood, it does not doom you to all of those negative outcomes. What matters is, the research has shown us, is that we can flood children and families with positive experiences that then balance that seesaw, balance that scale of negative outcomes and positive outcomes. We know that we can buffer the effects of adverse childhood experiences for children and families. And how we do that is by shifting what our interactions look like with those kids and with those families. And so I'm talking about, we have to look for what's strong first, not for what's wrong. It's really easy. We are genetically programmed to identify things that are wrong, things that are possible threats, things that don't feel good, that don't look good, that make us uncomfortable. What we need to start practicing is building some skill in recognizing that there's something good about what's happening, or there's something, I have to look hard enough to find what's good. And I say that because I was raised to believe that if I didn't have something nice to say, I should just not say anything at all. But what we know is that if you can't think of something nice to say, you're just not looking hard enough, right? So you have to dig a little deeper and identify what is strong, what is good. That makes a huge difference for what our interactions look like. I think another thing to keep in mind is that for children, no one is born knowing how to process really strong emotions. That's something that it's a skill that we build over a long period of time as we develop. So young children are not born with skills to regulate their emotions, to understand what they're feeling is really powerful, and then process that emotion so that they can then behave in an appropriate way. Children of trauma have an even more difficult time doing that. And so one of the things that's really helpful in alleviating caregiver stress is remembering that any child who is acting out because they're feeling really big emotions, so those really big tantrums where you're trying to get out of the house and every day I am late because this child is tantruming and giving me a hard time. If we can help caregivers remember that that child is not giving you a hard time, he's having a hard time. That changes our interactions with that child that then help de-escalate that behavior. If I believe that that child is giving me a hard time, I am the victim and I am going to respond with the same level of escalation of emotion, right, with that child. And what we know is that we can only de-escalate those emotions and those behaviors, calm those kids, if we can respond in a very calm, helpful way, right, that recognizes we've got to legitimize what they're feeling and then help them process what they're feeling. You know, I think stress is, I've got a lot of unicorn wishes that I wish for caregivers. And one of them is the alleviation of stress, right? Which I think is so, so important, because we know that that's what's hard for kids. That's what makes families less safe, right? Is stress. And I think when I think about stress, at my house, we talk about snow globing. So it's like if you take a snow globe and you shake it up really, really hard and all that snow is swirling around, you can't see clearly through that snow globe, right? Well, all that snow is swirling around. We know from research, we know from looking at MRIs of people's brains while they're experiencing stress, that's actually what happens in our brains. All of those stress hormones shut down our ability to think clearly and to problem solve, right? Shut down the portion of our brain that's in charge of executive function. So it's like shaking up a snow globe really, really hard. You have to wait for that snow to settle so that you can then see clearly, right? So we've got to de-escalate and calm down and help children calm down so that then they're able to actually hear what it is we're telling them, right? Hear what it is we're helping them problem solve through. So remembering, the first step is remembering that that child's not trying to do this to you. That child is experiencing stuff that is so big that they don't know what to do, and it's just busting out of them. So I think remembering that children are never trying to give you a hard time, they're just having a hard time and they don't know how to manage and process that. So small humans have really big feelings, right? And so I think learning about child development and what children are capable of related to regulation of emotion at what age is really important, right? But we also need to figure out how we support the building of being able to regulate emotions. You know, like I said a second ago, nobody's born knowing how to do that, right? It's something that we have to learn. It's a skill that we all need to build. And there are different ways that adults in children's lives can help kids do that. I think, we all know how important clear boundaries and clear expectations are for children. I think presetting children for transitions, presetting children for what comes next takes away some of that unknown, which helps with some boundaries, right? I check my phone a gazillion times a day because I'm looking at my calendar so that I know what comes next, right? It helps me not stress out about, oh my gosh, am I forgetting about something? It's the same thing for kids, right? We need to preset children for transitions. We need to let them know what's coming next. A big thing that we often forget about is that legitimizing the way somebody feels is the first step to helping them de-escalate what they're feeling, right? It's a first way that we can intervene in a way that helps de-escalate some of that strong emotion. But so often think of how many times you're at the market, or you are at a park, or you're at Target, some store, and you hear a little voice crying. And then the first thing you hear is an adult voice saying, oh, stop crying, you're okay. They're not okay, that's why they're crying, right? And so just because we think what they're experiencing may be silly or not a big deal, it's a big deal to them, and that's why they're crying, that's why they are upset. So stepping forward saying, oh my goodness, I see that you're upset, I'm so sorry you're sad, is legitimizing the way that child feels, which is so, so, so important. The other thing that I think requires a little more practice for all of us is we're good at sharing children's books to help children know what different emotions look like, right? We teach them what happy looks like, what sad looks like, what mad looks like, right? With different faces. We don't talk to kids a lot about what those emotions feel like physically. And I say that because if we want children to regulate their emotions, they need to be able to see it's coming, right? And so I know that when I'm feeling particularly challenged by something that is happening, right? Some interaction I'm having. So for example, somebody is angry with me, and I feel myself start to get stressed and feel anger myself, right? I know that when I'm feeling really challenged by some behaviors, I have a physical reaction. Like I feel it in my core. And sometimes I feel it in my head, right? In the back of my neck. That's my stop sign, right? I use that as my physical sign that I need to stop talking and listen, because if I don't use that as a stop sign, I'm going to react. And so when somebody is figuratively hitting you in the face with a lot of emotion, your reaction is to hit back in the same way. And if you can pause so that you can respond and not react, you're going to have more success with the de-escalation of whatever is happening, right? There'll be a calming that happens so that there can be an engagement in real conversation that might lead to some constructive problem solving. I think another thing we often do with children is our relationships with children are often grounded in power and not in respect. And if we want children to behave respectfully and understand what respect is, we have to model it for them and treat them respectfully too. And so, I think it starts really early. Like, how many times have you seen an adult walk up to a child whose nose is running and without saying a word, just walk up and wipe their nose? That's not respectful. And so I think about how would an adult feel if somebody just came up and wiped their nose without saying anything, right? We'd be horrified that somebody did that to us. So I think grounding our words and interactions in respectful relationship building is really, really important for children. The other reason respectful relationship building is so important for kids is that how they are treated when they are young is how they will expect to be treated by people they love later. So for children who are engaged in warm, loving, respectful relationships with the people, the adults in their life that they love, they learn that that's what love feels like. And so that's how they expect to be treated by other people that they're in relationships with later on in life as they're adults, right? But if children are in relationships that are about control, power, they're not respectful, they're not heard, they're handled roughly, that's what they associate, that's what love feels like. And so that will set the tone for their expectations for future relationships. And then I think the other thing is we want to make sure we're creating safe space for kids to be honest, to share their emotions. And so judgment can often be a huge barrier. And so shaming children about what they're feeling, then they learn that they shouldn't share that. They shouldn't feel that, right? So no judgment ever is something that's really important if we want to teach children how to regulate emotions. And when kids can regulate their emotions, life at home is much, much easier, right? I think another thing that's really important to remember is there's some powerful research that's come out of Massachusetts General Hospital. There's a group of clinical psychologists there who work with children who have developed kind of a method for working with children who present with chronic challenging behaviors. And it's called collaborative problem solving. And I'm not going to go into what that entails because that training is like a 4-day training and we have another 5 minutes. But what I will tell you is that their belief is that kids do well if they can. And so if a child can do well, he will do well. And if he's not doing well, then something's standing in his way. And it's our job as the helper adults in that child's life to help them figure it out, right? But all of our systems of discipline in schools and families, we believe that we can incentivize good behavior and extinguish the behaviors we don't want to see by ignoring them or by punishing them. And what that really means is that we actually don't believe that kids do well if they can, but we believe that kids do well if they want to. And what they've found from their research is that that's not the case. Children who present with chronic challenging behaviors need to develop 3 sets of skills in problem solving, frustration tolerance, and flexibility. And those are skills that we need to be intentional about building in children, because then that helps them, it unlocks problem solving, right? So, and frustration tolerance is huge, right? For what it does for behaviors. So all of this information is linked, but remembering that children do well if they can, is something really, really important and foundational to changing how we're interacting with kids. And so what we're really talking about is setting predictable routines, model, you want to use phrases, right, with children that you want them to use. You want to model behaviors that you want to see in them. Label negative feelings so that they understand that, provide some support for emotional regulation. You want to teach them how to share and encourage that, right? So there are a lot of things that we can do to help build those skills in kids. And then the last thing that I will say is that it's stressful being a parent. Before I was a parent, my background is early childhood, and I was a preschool special education teacher where I worked with children with emotional and behavioral labels. And I wish that I could have applied all of that information that I knew to be true to my own parenting when I first became a parent, because when you become a parent, everything you know flies out the window and it doesn't apply, right? And so one of the really valuable things that I've learned is related to managing my own stress and understanding my own stress level. So this is a great example. It's an old Quaker exercise where your hand is some significant stressor in your life, and you hold it in front of your face, and that's all you see. You can't see anything else but that stress. And what we want to be able to do is engage in enough kind of intention around de-escalating our own stress so that we can extend our arm so that that stressor may not go away, but we can see other things that are happening in our lives, right? So there's some perspective that we gain that's really, really important. And I think the way that I do that is I think about my stress level every day, and it's almost like I have it's like a measuring cup that you fill with liquid, and the liquid level is my stress level. And so some days I get out of bed and my stress level is really low. And that means that I can add a whole lot of stress on I can take on a lot more liquid in my cup before I'm underwater. And when I'm underwater, then I'm not the parent, I'm not the mom that I want to be every day. I find that my frustration tolerance is really low. I'm not patient. I tend to snap. I'm not the wife that I want to be. I'm not the friend, the coworker. I'm just not the human being that I want to be every day when I'm stressed out and underwater. There are other days that, because of work or family or finances, whatever it is, my baseline level might be here, which means I can't take on a whole lot of stress that day before I'm underwater, right? And so I think knowing, kind of doing a daily assessment of where your stress level is at allows you to understand what you can take on. And if your stress level is starting high, figuring out what are some tips and tricks that help you take care of yourself, that empties that cup of stress, right? That brings that stress level down. It can be drawing, it can be reading, it can be taking a shower. I know when I was first a mom, our daughter is adopted, and she came to us when she was 13 months old. And so she was already mobile. And so figuring out how to shower more than twice a week was really hard for me. It took me about 6 weeks to figure it out. And so initially my self-care was showering, right? Taking a nice long hot shower. So finding those things that help de-escalate your own stress level makes it easier to manage your stress when you're engaging with challenging behaviors that your children may be presenting with. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is my contact information, and Rae, feel free to share my contact information with folks. But I'll stop sharing and take any questions that folks might have. I know we're at time, but I'm happy to stay on if anybody's got any questions.
Oh, this is fantastic, Tamaé. Thank you so much. It's one of those presentations that I personally wish we would have booked more than a half an hour for, because we had one comment in the chat. There's so much useful information in this presentation, not just for dealing with small humans. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. You know, what I found is doing this work every day for the past 10 years, I found that it's actually changed my interactions with adults because the same rules apply.
100%. I found myself listening to you going, yep, I do that. I might need to really just step back when I'm having those interactions. And you know, anybody in the room that's got kinship children or children 100% can relate to your shower self-care story, because
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's really important to remember is that nobody gets it right all of the time, and that's okay.
No, and giving yourself grace is very
absolutely
important. I think at this point in the summer, as a parent, I really need this presentation. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking about this, getting an opportunity to share this. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for joining us. We've got a lot of thank yous coming in on the chat. I will be sharing Tamaé's PowerPoint as well as my own. So if you have any follow-up questions, you can ask her directly. You'll have her contact information. Thank you for joining us during your lunch. And we will see you next month, August 17th at 12 o'clock for a presentation from Berkshire Farms. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.